I came back to consciousness the way a match flares, sudden, violent, and short of air. There was ice in my lungs. Not the poetic kind you read in novels. Real cold. The kind that bites down through skin and muscle and makes your bones feel like glass. I lay on my side, half in mud, half in water, my cheek pressed to something rough and wet. A dock post. A root. I didn't know yet. I only knew the lake was breathing beside me, slow and dark, licking at my coat as if it had already decided I belonged to it. Somewhere above, boots crunched on frozen gravel. A man exhaled, steady. Not panicked, not shaking, just working through a list. My husband's voice. "Yeah," Darius said, low and practical, like he was ordering takeout. "We're at the lake house. On the back dock. She slipped." "It's bad." I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move. My body wanted to cough, to fight, to claw. But something older than fear took over. Instinct, maybe. Or the part of a 50-year-old woman that has seen enough to recognize when a story is being written around her. A story where she doesn't survive. "She's not responding," Darius continued. "Water's cold. I'm trying CPR." He wasn't doing CPR. I could hear his hands in his pockets. I could hear the calm in his voice. And in that calm, I heard the first true thing I'd heard from him in a long time. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to schedule me. A pause. The crackle of a call connecting. Then a second voice, female, close enough to be intimate, far enough to be safe. "Did you do it?" the woman asked. Not, "Is she okay?" Not, "Oh my God." Just a question with an end date. Darius didn't answer right away. His breath drifted down in a white ribbon, and I felt it brush my forehead. "I told you," he said, and the softness in his tone made my stomach turn. "It would look like an accident." A staged accident. Those two words floated above me like smoke and settled into my blood. I wanted to bolt upright, to scream his name, to spit the lake out of my mouth and into his face. But I stayed still, and the lake kept its cold hand on my ankle like a warning. The woman's voice tightened. "What if she survives?" I held my breath so hard my ribs ached. "She won't," Darius said. "She can't." Then he stepped away, and the crunch of his boots moved toward the house, toward warmth, toward a future that did not include me. I stayed in the mud, shaking without moving, and I thought, if I live through tonight, I will never be the same woman again. That was the first time I understood what a true crime story feels like from the inside. And then, like my mind couldn't hold the weight of it, I fell backward into darkness. "4 days earlier, I was standing at my mother's grave, clutching a bouquet of white chrysanthemums against my chest, like they could keep me from coming apart. The cemetery was quiet, in the way winter quiets everything. The trees were bare, their branches black against the low sky, and the wind carried a fine mist that clung to my hair and turned it into silver threads. I remember thinking my mother would have hated this weather. Eleanor Harris, Eleanor Vance before she married my father, was a woman who liked sunshine and clean lines and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon. But she died in her sleep on a gray night, as if she simply decided she was tired of living. People tell you that death comes in waves, that grief is a sea. I used to think that was just something people said because they didn't know what else to say. Then my mother stopped breathing, and I understood. Grief doesn't arrive as one clean blow. It rolls in. It pulls back. It comes again when you're not braced for it. I was 50 years old, and I felt like an abandoned child. Darius stood beside me with a black umbrella angled just right so the rain didn't touch my face. Tall, broad-shouldered, neat beard. The kind of man who looked reliable in a suit, like the world had always made room for him. He touched my elbow gently. "Let's go home, baby," he said. "You're soaked." His voice was soft, his hand was warm, and for a moment I let myself lean into it, because there is a particular kind of loneliness that makes even a small kindness feel like a life raft. I turned to look at the headstone one last time. A small oval portrait was set into the granite, my mother's face calm, her mouth held in that almost smile she used when she knew more than she was saying. Her eyes looked straight through me, like she'd tried to warn me and run out of time. I whispered, "I'm here, Mama," like she could still hear. Darius guided me toward the car. Inside, he turned on the heated seats and put on soft jazz, the kind my mother used to play on Sunday mornings while she rolled out pie crust. The warmth made my skin ache. I leaned back against the headrest and closed my eyes. "The lawyer called," Darius said carefully, like he was stepping onto ice. "He says we need to come in this week to sign the paperwork." Not now, I wanted to say. Not yet. Let me breathe for 2 days without having to be anyone's daughter or wife or responsible adult. But my mouth only formed, "Not now?" He covered my hand with his. "Of course, honey, of course. We can wait a few days. I just don't want you to miss any deadlines." Deadlines. The word landed wrong, sharp against the softness of death. At home, the house felt too big for 2 people. It was a 2-story colonial at the edge of town, inherited from my grandmother, with a porch that creaked and a fireplace that never quite warmed the corners. Darius took my wet coat, sat me by the fire, wrapped me in a blanket. He moved around the kitchen quietly, making tea the way he always did, when he wanted to be seen as steady. I watched him and thought, I don't deserve him. That thought had followed me for years. 8 years ago, after my first love left me with a suitcase of excuses and a heart that wouldn't stop shaking, Darius had appeared in my life like a man who knew exactly where to put his hands. He listened. He remembered. He showed up. And I fell in love so slowly, I didn't notice it happening until I couldn't imagine my days without him. When you're older, you don't fall for fireworks. You fall for consistency. I worked at a small gallery downtown, cataloging collections and teaching weekend workshops for retirees who wanted to learn watercolor. I made enough to pay bills, buy good coffee, and keep the lights on in my grandmother's house. I never thought about wealth. I never thought about stocks or land deeds or what you inherit when the last person who loves you dies. My mother thought about it. Apparently, because on the second day after the funeral, Darius reminded me again, gentle but persistent. "The attorney said there are documents that need your signature." I finally agreed to go. The law office was in an old brick building with creaky hardwood floors and ceilings high enough to make your voice feel small. The attorney, Mr. Layton, an elderly man with thick-rimmed glasses, laid a stack of paperwork in front of me and spoke in a tone that suggested death was just another transaction. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "your mother left you a residential home with a plot of land measuring 5 acres, a 3-bedroom condo downtown, a vehicle, and bank deposits totaling—" He named a number. It didn't feel like a number. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my chest. "There are also shares in several companies and jewelry in a safe deposit box," he continued. "And the lake property." "The lake house," I murmured. "Yes," he said, nodding. "The lake house. Deed in your mother's name, now to be transferred to you." Lake house inheritance. The phrase didn't belong in my mouth. My mother's lake house had been my childhood. Dock boards warm under my feet in July. My father teaching me to bait a hook. My mother yelling from the kitchen window that dinner was getting cold. It was memory, not money. Darius sat beside me, posture perfect, hands folded. He looked calm, but his fingers tightened on the armrest hard enough to turn his knuckles pale. Mr. Layton cleared his throat. "I also must inform you that according to state law, in the event of your death, in the absence of children and a will, all property passes to your spouse as sole heir." I nodded absently. The words slid past me like water, but Darius inhaled, a small sound, almost nothing. It was the first time I felt something move under my grief. Not fear yet, just a pinprick of awareness, like noticing a draft in a room you thought was sealed. On the drive home, Darius was quiet. When we pulled into our driveway, he finally spoke. "Maybe we should go somewhere," he said. "To the ocean. Florida, maybe. Sun, warmth. You need a distraction." "It's winter," I said. So what? We'll fly south. He smiled, quick and practiced. You'll feel better. I shook my head. Later, I need to sort through Mom's things, and I hesitated. I want to go to the lake house soon. His hands tightened on the steering wheel for half a second. Then he softened. Of course, whenever you're ready. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing. The house made its usual noises, pipes ticking, wind pressing at the windows. Darius's face in the moonlight looked sharper, his lips thinner, shadows making him seem almost cruel. I blinked and the illusion vanished. He was my husband again, reliable, loving. I fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, while Darius made coffee, his phone buzzed on the counter. I wasn't trying to snoop. It simply lit up, and my eyes caught the name on the screen before my conscience could look away. D. Just one letter, bright against the dark glass. Then the message preview. We can't wait any longer. Under the phone, a thin receipt peeked out, curled from heat. A prepaid top-up card. The kind teenagers buy when they don't want a bill. I'd seen them at the gas station by the highway, hanging beside the beef jerky. My fingers twitched toward it, then stopped. In my mind, I heard my mother's voice. Never touch what you can't unsee. Darius slid the receipt into his pocket, as if he'd felt my thought. When he turned, his wedding band caught the light, bright and innocent, like a weapon polished clean, right before it strikes. My stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my knees. Darius walked in, towel over his shoulder, humming like nothing in the world was wrong. He picked up his phone quickly, too quickly, and the screen went black. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a smile that felt like a lie in my teeth. Yeah, just tired. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. His lips were warm, and all I could think was, who is Dee, and why is she telling my husband we can't wait? I didn't ask. Not yet. Grief makes you cautious. It teaches you the cost of one wrong word. I told myself there was an explanation. A coworker, a client, a nickname for someone I didn't know. But as I stood there in my kitchen, holding my coffee, I felt my mother's picture on that headstone again, the way her eyes looked like a warning. And for the first time, I wondered something I'd never allowed myself to wonder. What if the man I married isn't who I think he is? If you're still with me, don't go anywhere. Because the next time that phone lit up, it wasn't a letter, it was a plan. And when I finally understood the truth, that my husband cheated, that the affair wasn't the worst part, and that money can turn a marriage into a murder, my life split into before and after. So stay with me. Hit like if you can, because it helps this story find the people who need it. And tell me in the comments what time it is, where you're watching from, and where in the world you are. Because what happened at that lake, on that dock, in the dead cold, it's coming. I didn't tell Darius I'd seen the name on his screen. I told myself that was what grown women did. We didn't jump at shadows. We didn't accuse without proof. We didn't let grief make us reckless. My mother was barely in the ground, and I could still feel the wet clay smell clinging to my coat. I wanted to believe my marriage was the one solid thing left. So I swallowed the question with my coffee and watched him move around the kitchen like a man performing calm. He rinsed dishes that were already clean. He folded the dish towel with sharp, neat corners. He checked the locks on the back door, then checked them again, like he couldn't stand the idea of anything being left unsecured. Do you want to go back to work next week? He asked, casual. Maybe, I said. The gallery's been patient. He nodded like he was listening, but his eyes weren't on me. They were on the calendar pinned to the fridge, where my mother's name was still written in my handwriting beside a doctor's appointment that would never happen. Darius stared at it a beat too long, then pulled it down and tossed it in the trash. I flinched. I wasn't ready to. Sorry, he said quickly. I thought it would hurt you to see it. It was such a perfect answer, I almost believed it. Almost. Because after he left for a quick meeting, he did something he'd never done. He set his phone face down on the counter and took it with him into the garage like it was a living thing that needed supervision. When the garage door rolled shut, the house went quiet, and my grief had room to speak again. I walked upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closet where my mother's cardigan still hung from the last time she visited. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't washed it. It still carried the faint powdery perfume she wore, something soft and old-fashioned, the scent of carefulness. I'm Monique Harris, Nikki to my friends and my students. I'm 50. I have a small silver streak at my temple that started during the pandemic and never went away. I teach art history part-time at the community center and catalog paintings for a gallery that can't decide if it's upscale or just pretending. My life has always been modest and orderly. I like warm lamps and clean counters. I like jazz on Sunday mornings. I like to know where my keys are. I didn't marry for money. I didn't even marry for romance. I married because Darius made the world feel steady when mine was shaking. He was the man who showed up with soup when I had the flu. The man who drove across town to jump my car, then laughed like it was nothing. The man who listened when I said I didn't want children late, not because I didn't love the idea, but because I didn't love the risk. He kissed my knuckles and said, "We'll do life your way." That's what I married. And maybe that's why the thought hit me like a bruise when my mother's attorney said the words, "If you die, it passes to your spouse." I didn't have children. I didn't have a will. I had a husband. After my father left, 15 years ago, with one suitcase and a silence that never healed, my mother built our life like a fortress. She worked, saved, invested, and never told me the numbers because she didn't want money shaping my choices. Freedom is quiet, she used to say. It doesn't brag. When she got sick, she moved back to the lake house full-time. Said the air was better. Said the city made her tired. I visited when I could, but life gets loud. Work, errands, my own marriage. I thought I had time. Now the lake house inheritance sat on my shoulders like a wet coat. 5 acres, the attorney said. A condo downtown, accounts, stocks, jewelry. It was more than I'd ever imagined my mother had. More than I wanted. More than felt safe. And Darius, my reliable, steady Darius, had listened to that list with a stillness that didn't match grief. It matched calculation. The first time I met Danielle Brooks, she wore heels that didn't belong on icy sidewalks and a camel coat that looked untouched by winter. She came to our house 2 days after the law office, smiling like she'd been invited. "Mrs. Harris," she said, holding out a hand with manicured nails the color of dark wine. "I'm Danielle. Darius said you might need help sorting the property situation." Property situation. Like my mother's life was a folder. Darius hovered behind her, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Too familiar, too casual. When he noticed my eyes, he moved his hand away, like it had only been guiding her through the doorway. "Danielle's a realtor," he explained. "She knows the lake area. She can tell us what the house is worth, what options we have." "We," I repeated, because the word tasted strange. Danielle's smile didn't move. "It's always best to understand your assets," she said, "especially with insurance considerations. Winter properties can be tricky." Insurance, again. "Is there a rush?" I asked. Darius answered too fast. "No." "Of course not. Just information." Danielle looked around my living room, taking in my mother's framed photo on the mantel, the quilt she'd made draped over the armchair, the small oil painting I'd bought at a student show. Her eyes lingered on none of it. She was measuring space, value, leverage. "Your mother had excellent taste," she said, and the compliment slid off her tongue like something she'd practiced in a mirror. When she left, she brushed past Darius in the hallway. Their shoulders touched. She murmured something I didn't catch. He smiled, quick, private. It was nothing. That's what I told myself. But later, when I went to refill the sugar bowl, I found my husband's phone charging in the corner, screen lighting up again. D. "Don't forget the dock paperwork." My hands went cold. Dock paperwork. The lake house had a dock. My mother used to sit there with a blanket and a book, letting the water calm her nerves. The dock wasn't paperwork. It was memory. I didn't read further. I couldn't. Not yet. There's a moment when your life offers you a door, and you know that if you open it, you'll never return to the room you were in before. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I did what I've always done when I'm scared. I made a list. 1. Don't confront him without evidence. 2. Go to the lake house and go through my mother's things. If she suspected something, she would have written it down. 3. Call Auntie Renee. Not a real aunt, but my mother's closest friend, the woman who watched me grow up and never sugarcoated anything. If anyone could tell me whether my instincts were lying, it was her. 4. Keep breathing, even when it hurts. That night, Darius suggested a reset weekend at the lake house. His voice was gentle, his eyes warm, and his hand found mine under the table like muscle memory. Fresh air, he said. Quiet. You've been carrying too much. I looked at his wedding ring, bright against his skin, and I heard my own thoughts in a voice that sounded older than me. He wants you isolated. I smiled anyway. Maybe you're right, I said, because sometimes the safest way to survive is to nod. When he went upstairs to shower, I walked into the laundry room and opened the small cabinet where we kept spare batteries and old chargers. My fingers shook as I rummaged, not sure what I was looking for, only sure that something was hidden. Behind a box of detergent pods, I found a cheap charging cable, the kind that doesn't match anything we owned. No brand, no packaging, just a wire that looked like it had been bought in a hurry at a gas station. A secret phone has to drink power too. I held the cable in my hand and felt the first true pulse of fear since the cemetery. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows like it was trying to get in. And in the quiet house, I finally admitted it to myself, in a whisper so small it barely counted as truth. My husband might have cheated. And if there was an affair, it wasn't just about love. It was about timing. I didn't sleep much after I found that cable. Every time the house settled, my mind translated the noise into footsteps. Darius rolled over once and draped an arm across my waist, warm and heavy, and I lay there stiff as a board, staring at the dark like it could explain him. At 2 in the morning, his phone lit up on the nightstand, face down, like a guilty thing. He didn't stir. I told myself not to look. I told myself I was not that woman, the kind who snoops and spirals and ruins a marriage over a misunderstanding. But my mother was barely in the ground, and I could still see the look in her portrait on the headstone. Calm, sad, and knowing. My hand moved before my pride could stop it. I slid the phone a fraction and caught the name. D. New message. You promised. This weekend. No more delays. My stomach clenched so hard I tasted acid. Weekend. The lake house weekend. The reset he'd suggested like it was therapy. I set the phone back exactly where it was and forced my breathing quiet. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it. If I cried, he'd soothe me. If I accused, he'd say grief was making me paranoid. And he'd sound reasonable. I needed proof, not feelings. Proof. By morning, the plan was simple. Go with him. Watch everything. Say little. At breakfast, Darius was cheerful in that careful way, like he was performing calm. He made omelets, kissed my forehead, and asked if I wanted to return to work soon. Maybe, I said. The gallery's been patient. He nodded like he was listening, but his eyes kept drifting to the fridge calendar. My mother's name still written beside appointments that would never happen. Without looking at me, Darius ripped the page down and tossed it in the trash. I flinched. I wasn't ready to. Sorry, he said quickly. I thought it would hurt you. It was a perfect answer. Too perfect. When he stepped away to take a call, I pulled the calendar back out of the trash, smoothed it on the counter, and stared at my own handwriting. Mom. Cardiology. Mom. Lab work. Mom. Lake house. She'd been sick longer than I admitted, and I'd been trusting my husband to be the steady thing. My phone buzzed. Auntie Renee. Renee wasn't my blood aunt. She was my mother's closest friend, the woman who watched me grow up and never sugarcoated anything. I answered and tried to sound normal. Baby, Renee said. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I lied. You don't sound okay. A beat. Where's Darius? In the other room. Renee lowered her voice as if she could sense danger through the line. Nikki, your mama told me something a few months back. She said she felt watched at the lake, cars slowing down, folks asking questions about the property. My throat tightened. Did she say who? No. But she said to be careful with signatures, careful with people who show up eager to help. Renee paused, then went on, careful as a surgeon. And she mentioned your husband. She said he was polite, too polite. Said his eyes didn't smile when his mouth did. Cold traced down my spine. I swallowed and said it, small and raw. I think he's having an affair. Silence. Then Renee asked, with who? I don't know. Someone named D. And there's paperwork talk. Insurance talk. Doc paperwork. My voice thinned. It doesn't feel like just cheating. It feels like planning. Renee exhaled hard. Lord have mercy. I'm going to the lake house, I said. I need to go through Mom's things. If she suspected something, she would have left a trail. Okay, Renee said, and her tone turned into steel. You call me when you get there. Share your location. Keep your phone charged. And Nikki, if your gut says leave, you leave. No arguing. After we hung up, I sat on the bed and stared at the closet door, trying to remember the version of my life where the biggest fear was loneliness. I'm Monique Harris, Nikki to friends, Mrs. Harris to the kids in my weekend classes. I teach art history, catalog paintings, and I like my life quiet. I didn't marry for money. I married because Darius felt steady when my world wasn't. After my father left, my mother built our life like a fortress, worked, saved, invested, and never bragged about it. Freedom is quiet, she used to say. Now her freedom had turned into a target. That afternoon, I opened a safe deposit box in my name. Small, cheap insurance against a world that suddenly felt unsafe. I told myself it was just organization. But my hands shook the entire time. When I got home, Darius was on his laptop looking at listings. I booked us a cabin near the lake, he said. Friday to Sunday. Fresh air, quiet. You need it. We could stay at Mom's house, I said. He smiled. Too many memories. Somewhere neutral. Neutral. The lake was the opposite of neutral. It was my childhood, my mother, my father's absence, and now, maybe, my danger. I nodded anyway. Okay. Friday arrived with a sky the color of tin. The roads were slick with frozen rain, and the trees along the highway stood like dark bones. Darius drove with one hand on the wheel and the other on my knee. The touch used to comfort me. Now it felt like placement. He filled the silence with harmless talk, then slid in a line that made my skin tighten. If you ever wanted to sell the lake property, he said, casual, now's a good time to get paperwork in motion. It's winter, I said. Serious buyers only, he replied. Danielle says a lot, I cut in. His jaw tightened. She's a professional, Nikki. Danielle, the realtor, the help. The cabin he booked was a log place tucked among trees, smelling of cedar and old smoke. Inside, Darius moved around the space like he'd been there before, knew where the glasses were, where the extra blankets sat. It might have meant nothing. Still, it sat wrong. I want to go to Mom's house, I said. Today. He hesitated, then nodded. Of course. The lake house was wrapped in winter silence. Wind chimes hung still. Snow lay smooth on the lawn like no one had walked there in days. I unlocked the door and stepped into air that smelled like dust and wilted flowers. Not my mother's usual lemon-clean scent. Absence has a smell. Once you know it, you never forget. Darius followed, hovering. You okay? I nodded because my voice wouldn't cooperate. We walked through rooms full of quiet traps, my childhood photo holding a fish, my mother's half-finished quilt, the chair by the window where my father used to sit before he left and never came back. In my mother's bedroom, Darius drifted toward the dresser and asked, too smoothly, Do you know where she kept important papers? Somewhere, I said. Safe? Lockbox? There's a safe deposit box, I said. The attorney mentioned it. Darius's eyes flickered. Not grief, not sympathy. Interest. In the bottom drawer of her nightstand, beneath folded scarves, I found a sealed envelope. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, Nikki, when I'm gone. My hands froze. Darius leaned closer. What's that? Just a letter, I said, and slid it into my coat pocket fast. His gaze sharpened. A letter to you? Yes. Can I? No, I said, too quick. I forced a breath, softened my face. Not yet. That's between me and her. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on my pocket, as if he could see through fabric. I moved to her little study. The desk drawers were locked. My mother rarely locked anything. Darius offered, Need a key? I can help, look. No, I said, and heard the edge in it. His expression tightened. Nikki, I'm your husband. I met his eyes. That's why I need space. For a heartbeat, his face went blank. Then the smile returned, pleasant, empty. Okay, he said. Take your time. He walked away. I waited until his footsteps faded, then knelt and ran my fingers under the desk the way my mother taught me. Hide where the hand goes, not where the mind points. Tape. I peeled it back and found a tiny brass key stuck beneath the wood. I slid it into the lock. The drawer opened. Inside were deeds, insurance papers, county documents, and beneath them, a thick leather-bound notebook. A diary. My mother didn't keep diaries, I thought. But there it was, heavy with years. I opened it. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. Today I met Nikki's husband alone, she wrote. He came without her, said she was at work. Too proper, something insincere. His eyes don't smile when his lips do. I hope I'm wrong. My throat closed. I flipped pages. A year later, Darius came again, she wrote. Asked about the land, the deed, whether there are other heirs. I answered, only Nikki. He smiled and said it was wonderful, but I thought, you aren't glad I'm remarkable. You're glad I'm alone. I sat back, dizzy. Doc permit. Insurance? Will. The words appeared again and again, sprinkled between notes about her illness like little alarms she tried to bury. Darius asked about life insurance today. Darius wanted to know if the doc permit was current. Darius asked if I'd made a will. My fingers went numb. D. Don't forget the doc paperwork. The pieces slid together with a click that made me nauseous. A floorboard creaked in the hall. I froze, held my breath, listened. Footsteps passed by the study door, paused, then moved on. Darius. I shut the diary, slid it into my tote under a stack of old magazines, and forced myself to stand. When I walked into the kitchen, Darius was making tea, acting like nothing was happening. What'd you find? He asked casually. Receipts, I lied. Mom saved everything. He smiled, satisfied. Of course she did. He was good at being good. That was the cruelest part. As evening fell, we drove back to the cabin. The diary pressed against my ankle through the tote bag, a heavy secret riding with me. Darius lit a fire, poured wine, dimmed the lights. It looked like romance. It felt like staging. To you, he said. To healing. I clinked glasses and took a sip. Bitter aftertaste, like pennies. He went outside to check the locks, and the moment the door shut, I pulled the envelope from my pocket and tore it open. My mother's words were short, not sentimental, and every line felt like a hand gripping my wrist. Nikki, if Darius is still in your life, hear me with your head, not your heart. I do not trust him. He has asked about my assets, your future, the doc, the deed, insurance. A loving man asks about your happiness first. Do not sign anything quickly. Do not let him isolate you. Make a will. If you ever feel unsafe, call Renee. I love you. Mama. My vision blurred. I pressed the letter to my chest, not for comfort, more like armor. The door clicked. I wiped my face fast, folded the letter, and hid it against my skin. Darius walked in with cold air on him, cheeks pink, smile soft. All set, he said. Everything's secure. Good, I murmured. He came behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. His breath touched my neck, and I went still. You're tense, he whispered. You don't have to be. I forced a small laugh. Just tired. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we'll go down to the dock. You can say goodbye properly. Down to the dock. My stomach rolled. That night, after he fell asleep, I slipped into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and called Renee. I found a diary, I whispered. She wrote about him, the deed, insurance, dock permits. She didn't trust him. Renee's voice went hard. Do you feel unsafe right now? Yes, I admitted. Then you keep your location on, and you don't drink anything you didn't watch being poured, she said. And if he tries to isolate you on that dock, you leave. You don't explain. You run. Back in bed, Darius slept peacefully, mouth slightly open like a man with nothing to hide. I watched him and wondered how many nights he'd slept beside me while planning a future without me. Morning brought pale sun and sharp air. Darius made pancakes, whistling, as if this was a normal grieving weekend. Eat, he said. Then we'll go to the lake house. I want to show you something your mom would have wanted you to see. The way he said my mom made my skin crawl. At the lake house, he moved through the kitchen like he owned it, found matches, started coffee without looking. He was on his phone, thumbs moving fast, body turned slightly away from me. I walked into the study, closed the door, and took photos of the diary pages with shaking hands. Proof. Then I emailed them to myself under a boring subject line. Gallery receipts. When I stepped back into the hall, Darius was standing there, waiting. Ready? He asked. For what? The dock, he said, smiling gentle. But his eyes were empty. We walked the back path through trees toward the water. Snow crunched under our boots. The lake lay dark and still, ice gripping the edges like teeth. The dock stretched out, boards slick with frost, railing low. Darius stepped onto it first and held out his hand. Careful, he said. It's slippery. I took his hand because refusing would show fear, and fear gives men like him information. At the end of the dock, the wind hit harder, carrying the smell of cold water and something faintly oily, like a boat motor. Darius looked out over the lake. Your mom loved this view, he said softly. She told me it helped her sleep. Did she? Or did he watch her sleep? Then a car door slammed up by the house. I flinched. Darius's eyes flicked toward the driveway. That'll be Danielle. My heart stopped. Why is she here? He smiled as if it was obvious. Paperwork. Quick stuff. Footsteps crunched along the path. Danielle appeared in her camel coat, a bright flash of city money among bare branches. She stepped onto the dock without hesitation, like she'd done it before, and held out a folder. Nikki? She said sweetly. I'm so sorry about your mother. I stared at the folder like it was a snake. Danielle lowered her voice. Just standard dock permits and maintenance contracts. If you don't sign, the county can fine you, and you don't want issues with insurance. If something happens out here, insurers love excuses not to pay. Accidents. Darius watched my face with the attention of a man waiting for the right moment. I'll look later, I said. Danielle's smile tightened. It's better to do it now, while we're all together. All together, like a meeting, like a plan. A gust of wind swept across the dock. My boots shifted a fraction. The boards felt slicker than frost alone, and that oily smell rose again. My mind snapped. A film. A slip. Darius stepped closer, voice low. Nikki, it's quick. You trust me, right? Trust tasted like blood. I looked from his face to hers and saw it clearly. This wasn't romance. This was business. My husband cheated, yes. There was an affair. But the affair had hardened into a partnership, and I was standing above dark water in winter with two people watching me like a problem that needed solving. I'm cold, I said. I'm going inside. Darius's eyes tightened. Just sign, then we'll go. No, I said softly. Danielle tried. Nikki, no, I repeated, firmer. Not today. For a second, the air went sharp with tension, the lake holding its breath. Then Darius smiled again, slow, too calm. Okay, he said. We won't rush you. But his hand stayed on my elbow, and the grip was firmer than affection. As we walked back toward the shore, Danielle followed behind, heels clicking on wood. I felt like prey being guided back into cover, and my mother's warning burned in my head like a live wire. Do not let him isolate you. This weekend was never about healing. It was about timing. We went inside, but the cold didn't leave my body. In the kitchen, Darius acted like he'd just rescued me from inconvenience, instead of pushing me toward a signature. Danielle hovered near the doorway, eyes on her phone, waiting. I'm going to check the furnace, Darius said. He grabbed a flashlight from a drawer as if he knew exactly where my mother kept it, then glanced at Danielle. Come with me. I want to show you the crawlspace entrance. They disappeared down the hall. I told myself to stay put. I didn't. I moved in my socks, stepping where the boards were least creaky, and stopped near the laundry room. Their voices leaked out, muffled but clear enough. You shouldn't have brought papers out there, Darius said. Danielle snapped. You told me she'd sign. You said she was soft. She is soft, he replied. She's just spooked. Grief makes people weird. And if she doesn't sign? A pause. Then we adjust. We don't need her signature on everything. Danielle's heels clicked. I'm not comfortable with adjust. Darius's tone went intimate in the ugliest way. D, you want the same thing I want. We're too close to stop. D. Danielle's voice lowered. What about the insurance policy? Are you sure you're listed correctly? I checked, Darius said. Beneficiary is set. Once the deed transfer is clean, it's simple. Danielle whispered, This is insane. It's practical, Darius said. People slip. People drown. They call it tragedy. My throat closed. I backed away before my body betrayed me. When they returned, both of them wore bright, public smiles. Danielle announced she had to leave. She didn't look at me. She looked at Darius, and there was something tight in her expression, like fear trying to behave. Back at the cabin, Darius poured wine and tried to make the night feel normal. I played along until he said he was running to town for painkillers. The moment the door shut, I pulled the cheap charging cable from my coat lining. Then I went into the bedroom and opened Darius's duffel. At the bottom, wrapped in a sock, was a flip phone. A second phone. A second life. The battery was dead. The cable fit perfectly. The screen lit up with a weak buzz, and my skin went cold all over again. No passcode. No lock. Men like Darius don't expect their wives to look. I opened the messages. The thread with D was long. Months, maybe years. My name appeared like an inconvenience. My mother's illness showed up like a schedule. The lake house inheritance was discussed like a prize. Then I saw it, a message from 3 weeks ago that made the room tilt. D. You sure the dock is safe? Darius. Oil film works better than ice. Looks natural. I tasted bile. More messages followed, plain and casual. D. What if she grabs the ladder? Darius. There won't be a ladder. I'm removing it Friday. Friday? Today. D. And if she won't sign? Darius. She won't have to. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't just that my husband cheated. This wasn't just an affair. This was a staged accident, planned like a chore. I took screenshots and emailed them to myself under a boring subject line, then forwarded them to Renee with one sentence. He's planning to make me slip off the dock. Renee's reply came fast. Leave. Now. Leaving was the smart choice. But another thought rose up, slow and stubborn. If I ran without locking down my mother's assets, he would chase me. He would charm a judge, spin a story, paint me unstable. He would keep reaching for what he thought was his. My mother wrote, Make a will. I searched local attorneys and called the first firm that answered. My voice sounded steady, like it belonged to someone else. I need an emergency appointment to draft a will and change beneficiaries, I said. A woman paused, then asked, "Are you safe right now?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Come at 9 tomorrow," she said. "Ask for attorney Yolanda Price." Tomorrow. If I was alive tomorrow. I wiped the flip phone clean, slid it back into the sock, back into the duffel, and zipped it up exactly the way it had been. I tucked the cable away again. Then I opened my mother's diary and found an entry dated 2 weeks before she died. "I feel I am running out of time," she wrote. "If my daughter reads this, I pray she chooses her life over her kindness." I whispered, "Okay, Mama." The cabin door opened. Darius walked in with a pharmacy bag and a nicer bottle of wine, smiling like he'd brought comfort instead of danger. "Got your painkillers," he said, "and something better to drink." "Thank you," I said, and my voice didn't crack. He studied my face too long. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm okay." He cupped my cheek, thumb brushing under my eye as if he could wipe away what he couldn't see. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we'll take a walk down to the dock again. Just us. No interruptions. Just us. Isolated." My stomach tightened, but I smiled. "That sounds nice." He kissed my forehead and went to bed satisfied, like a man who believed the ending was already written. I lay awake, counting my breaths, hearing my mother's warning in the dark. "Do not let him isolate you. If he wanted a staged accident, I would give him one. But I would be the one holding the evidence when the water went cold." Before dawn, I slipped out of bed and stood in the cabin's living room, listening to the way the fire popped in the stove. Darius snored softly, a comfortable sound that used to mean safety. Now it sounded like confidence. I opened my phone and checked that my location was still shared with Renee. A tiny dot on a map. A thin thread in a world that suddenly felt built for hiding bodies. Then I did the next thing my old life would have called dramatic, and my new life called necessary. I packed a small emergency bag. Not luggage. Evidence. The diary went first, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag so moisture couldn't ruin ink. My mother's letter went with it, folded tight. I added a portable charger, a spare hoodie, my car keys, and the only jewelry I cared about, my mother's wedding ring, which I'd found in her nightstand and kept in my pocket since the lake house. It felt like a charm. It felt like a promise. I set the bag by the front door where I could grab it in one motion. Then I opened my voice memo app and tested it. Record, stop, play. The sound of my own breathing filled the speaker, too loud, too human. I deleted the test. I set it again, ready for one tap. I turned my phone brightness down until it was nearly invisible. If Darius wanted silence, I would bring a microphone. When the sky began to lighten, I went outside alone. The air knifed into my lungs, clean and brutal. The trees stood black against the pale morning, and somewhere far off, a bird called like it was warning me. I walked the short path toward the lake, keeping my steps slow, controlled. The dock was visible through the trees, a darker line against the water. I stopped at the edge of the clearing and stared. Something was missing. The aluminum ladder that used to hang on the side, my father installed it when I was little, was gone. My stomach sank. The texts were real. The plan was moving. I didn't step onto the dock. Not yet. I just stood there and listened. The lake made no sound. It waited. When I returned to the cabin, Darius was awake, stretching like a man about to enjoy a simple day. He smiled when he saw me. "Morning," he said. "You were up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He studied me, then softened his face. "You'll sleep better after a walk. I made coffee." He poured it in front of me, and I watched his hands the entire time. I drank only a sip and let the heat sit in my stomach like a stone. He moved behind me and rubbed my shoulders. "We'll do the dock first," he murmured. "Then we'll go see Yolanda. The attorney. Later in the week, get the boring stuff done." My heart stuttered. Yolanda. He didn't know her name should have been in his mouth. He'd said it without thinking, like he'd heard it recently, like he'd been closer to my phone calls than he should have been. He felt my shoulders stiffen and chuckled softly. Sorry, my coworker's name is Yolanda. Just popped into my head. A lie with the wrong texture. I forced myself to nod. It's fine. He kissed my temple. Get your coat, it's cold. Cold. Always cold. As I stood to get my coat, my fingers brushed the emergency bag by the door, hidden in plain sight. My pulse steadied. I was ready to run if I had to, but I wasn't going to run blind. Darius grabbed his phone, his real phone, and slipped it into his pocket. His other phone stayed hidden in his duffel, silent as a snake in a hole. Ready? He asked. I looked at the man I'd married, at the way he held his shoulders, at the way his smile sat too carefully on his face. 8 years of my life had been spent trusting that smile. Ready, I said. And as we stepped out into the winter air, I made myself one promise, clear as a vow. If the water takes me today, it won't take the truth with it. I tightened my scarf, started the recording with my thumb, and followed him toward the dock, counting each step today, twice. The dock didn't creak the way it used to. The boards were glazed with something that caught the gray light like a thin skin. Frost, yes, but not just frost. A slick shine that made the wood look freshly varnished. The wind cut across the water and slid under my coat, cold enough to sting my teeth. Darius walked ahead of me with his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, moving like he owned the end of this story. I followed one step behind, my phone in my pocket, voice memo running. You okay back there? He asked without turning. Just cold, I said. We reached the far end where the railing dipped low. To the right, the ladder should have been. My father's aluminum ladder bolted into the side. It wasn't there. Only 2 empty bolt holes and a rust stain shaped like a missing tooth. I stopped. My stomach dropped. Darius stopped a beat later, like he expected me to keep walking. He turned, and I watched his eyes flick from my face to the water and back. Assessment. Beautiful, isn't it? He said softly. Your mom always said it calmed her. You removed the ladder, I heard myself say. His expression stayed smooth. Removed what? The ladder, I whispered. He glanced down, feigned surprise. Maybe the county took it, or your mom had it serviced. Don't do this to yourself, Nikki. Stop, I said. Darius smiled in that careful way. Pleasant, empty. You're exhausted. Grief is twisting everything. He stepped closer, took my hands like a priest taking confession. His wedding band pressed into my skin. We can sell this place, he murmured. Move on, start fresh. Sell. Move on. Reduce my mother to a number. I pulled my hands free. I'm not selling anything. The smile thinned. Okay, he said. Then stand with me a minute. He moved behind me, close, too close. His chest almost touched my back. He was between me and shore. Careful, he murmured. It's slippery. My eyes dropped to the boards. That oily sheen, that faint engine grease smell I'd caught twice before. My mother used to say, when something feels off, leave. I want to go inside, I said, forcing a small laugh. My toes are numb. In a minute, he said. Darius, please. He sighed like patience. If you'd just listen, he murmured. Life could be easier. Easy sounded like a threat. His hand slid to my elbow. Support, he would have called it. He shifted his weight, a subtle nudge timed with my inhale. My boot slid. I pitched sideways, arms flailing. Instinct screamed, grab him, trust him, let him catch you. I didn't. I let myself go. The lake hit like a slap and a fist at the same time. Cold exploded through my coat, stole air from my throat, turned my bones to glass. I went under, and the world became black water, bubbles, and a muffled roar. My lungs convulsed. My mouth tried to inhale water. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. I kicked, but my coat dragged. My fingers scraped wood beneath the dock. I searched for the ladder that wasn't there, panic rising like fire. This is how people die, my mind whispered, not with a scream, with a mistake. My hand found a metal ring, an old tie-off point. I hooked it and pulled. My head broke the surface, and I got one ragged gasp that burned like knives. Then I let my chin dip again. I let my arms loosen. I let my body sag. If I fought, he'd finish the job. Above me, Darius's voice snapped into public grief. Nikki! Nikki! Hold on! Somebody help! Then softer, close enough that only the lake and I could hear. Stay down! Boots shifted. He dialed a number. A call connected. She went in, he said quietly. It's happening. A pause. Then a woman's voice, tight and shaking. Did you? Danielle, D. Darius's tone went soothing, intimate in the ugliest way. I didn't push. She slipped. That's the story. Oh my God, Danielle whispered. Not now, Darius warned. You wanted this. I wanted a divorce, she hissed. I didn't want murder. Darius laughed under his breath. Divorce gets messy. Half isn't enough. Not with what she inherited. The words carved into me. Husband cheated, yes. But the affair had become a business partnership, and I was the obstacle. And if she survives? Danielle asked. She won't, Darius said. Water shock. No ladder. She's already fading. He stepped closer. His fingers touched my neck, checking for a pulse. I slowed my breathing until my chest barely moved. His thumb pressed, paused. Then he whispered, almost tender, I'm sorry, Nikki. You were good, just inconvenient. His hand lifted. His shadow moved away. Sirens wailed in the distance, winding closer through the trees. Darius's voice rose again, theatrical, perfect. Please, hurry! My wife's in the water. Hands grabbed my shoulders and hauled me up. Pain flared in my ribs. Foil blanket crinkled around me. And the sound made me think of body bags. I let my eyes flutter open, unfocused, like a woman half drowned and half delirious. Darius was there instantly, hair mussed, face twisted with performative terror. He grabbed my hand and squeezed too tight. Baby, I'm here, he sobbed. You scared me to death. I squeezed back weakly, because survival is a performance too. At the hospital, fluorescent lights made everything harsh. They checked for hypothermia, listened to my lungs, ordered scans. A doctor with tired eyes said, You're lucky. Lucky, if he knew. Darius arrived with gift shop flowers, white roses, the kind people buy when they want to look innocent. He rushed to my bed like a man in love. Nikki? He breathed. Thank God. He leaned to kiss my forehead. I turned slightly, pretending discomfort, and he adjusted instantly, apologizing like a saint. I told you it was slippery, he murmured low. You should have listened. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the lake. I let my eyes fill with tears. I'm sorry, I whispered, and hated myself for how easy the words came. He smiled, satisfied. Rest. I'll take care of everything. For the next few hours, he stayed at my bedside like a statue built out of devotion. He asked the nurse for extra blankets. He brushed damp hair off my forehead. He told anyone who would listen that he was so grateful and so scared, and that he should have insisted I stay inside. Every sentence carried the same hidden message. I'm the careful one. She's the fragile one. If anyone needed to be watched, it was me. A young nurse checked my vitals and smiled at him. You're a good husband, she said. Darius squeezed my hand and looked at me with wet eyes. I try, he whispered. I stared past him at the heart monitor's green line and thought about how easy it is to turn kindness into camouflage. When the doctor asked how I fell, Darius answered before I could. She lost her footing, he said. There was black ice. Black ice. The phrase landed like a rehearsed note. I imagined him saying it to himself in the mirror while he shaved, practicing the right amount of regret. They moved me to a small room with a curtain that never fully closed. The hospital at night has its own language: squeaking wheels, distant coughs, the soft beep of machines keeping score. Somewhere down the hall, a woman moaned, long and low, like a warning siren that never finished its sentence. Darius left only when the nurse made him. "Visiting hours," she said. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Try to sleep," he murmured. "I'll be right back in the morning." When he walked away, his shoulders didn't sag with relief the way a worried husband's should. They stayed straight, purposeful, like he was moving to the next task. Alone, I reached for the call button and asked for water, then asked, casually, if anyone had turned in a phone from the accident scene. The nurse shook her head. "Not yet, honey. Sometimes property comes later." Later could be too late. If the recording existed, Darius would hunt it like an animal hunts scent. I didn't have my phone, but I did have the one thing men like him forget: routine. Darius always reused passwords, always picked the same security questions. On the hospital's tablet, I logged into my email and found my earlier message: photos of the burner phone screen, the thread where he wrote about the ladder, the oil, the timing. The evidence was still there, waiting like a sealed jar. I forwarded everything again, this time to Renee and to Yolanda's general office inbox, so it would sit on servers I didn't control and Darius couldn't touch. Then I logged out, erased recent activity, and lay back like a woman who had done nothing but heal. Around midnight, a shadow passed my curtain. Darius. He stood there a moment, not entering, just watching. I kept my breathing slow, kept my face blank. After a minute, he walked away, and the air in my chest loosened. He wasn't checking on me. He was checking on the story. That was when I understood the real danger. He didn't need to succeed once. He only needed patience. In the dim light, I pictured my mother's handwriting, the warning she'd tried to leave me. I promised her silently, "I will not die politely. I will make noise for them again." That night, after Darius finally left, I asked for the hospital phone and called Renee. She answered on the first ring. "Baby?" "I'm alive," I whispered. "What happened?" "He did it," I said. "He tried. And D is Danielle. I heard them." Renee's voice turned into steel. "Do you have evidence?" "I found burner messages before," I said. "I emailed myself photos. But my phone, the recording, it's gone." "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow, you go to attorney Yolanda Price. You draft a will. You lock down every door money can open." The next day, the nurse brought a bag of my belongings: wallet, keys, scarf, no phone. "Lost at the scene," she said. "It happens." Renee arrived around noon, hugged me, then scanned the room like she was mapping exits. "In the hallway," I whispered. "Making calls." "Good," she said. "We move." In the lobby, Darius spotted us and hurried over. "Renee?" he said, surprise flickering. "What are you doing here?" Renee smiled sweetly. "Taking care of my niece." "I'm her husband," he said, voice polite, jaw tight. "And I'm her family," Renee replied. Darius looked at me, eyes asking a question his mouth couldn't risk. "Are you sure?" I lowered my lashes and whispered, "Renee makes me feel safe." He couldn't argue with safe without looking guilty, so he smiled. "Whatever you need." Renee drove me straight to Yolanda Price's office. Yolanda was a black woman in her 60s with a silver bun and a gaze that didn't blink when people lied. "Do you believe your husband is a threat to your life?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," Yolanda replied, already writing. "We start where the law is strongest: paper." We drafted a will that afternoon. I named Renee executor. I left my assets to my mother's community art fund, and failing that, to charity. Darius would receive nothing. The words felt like armor. Yolanda leaned back. "This doesn't stop violence," she said, "but it changes motivation. It gives you leverage." I thought of Danielle's voice, shaking, unsure, the weak link. That night at Renee's kitchen table, I said, "I'm going to call Danielle." Renee stiffened. "Not alone." "With a plan," I promised. The next morning, Yolanda arranged for Detective Calvin Moore, plainclothes, to be nearby. "You do not meet her without coverage," Yolanda warned. I called Danielle from Renee's backyard, my hands trembling. She answered on the second ring. "Nikki? Danielle, I need to talk." A pause. "How are you feeling?" "Cold," I whispered, "and scared." Silence. "Darius said it was an accident," she offered too fast. "You were there," I said gently. "You saw the boards." Her breath hitched. "I just don't know who to trust," I added. A long pause, then her voice broke. "This wasn't supposed to happen like that." "How was it supposed to happen?" I asked very softly. "I can't talk about this on the phone," she whispered. "Meet me," I said. "Please. I just want to understand." She agreed to meet at a diner by the highway at noon. At the diner, Detective Moore sat at the counter with coffee. A small recorder sat in my purse, already on. Danielle slid into the booth across from me, wearing sunglasses in cloudy weather. "It was supposed to be a slip," she whispered. Not, not you fighting." "He told you he'd remove the ladder," I said. Danielle's shoulders sagged. "Yes." "And the oil?" I asked. Her throat bobbed. "He said an oil film looks like ice. He said nobody questions winter accidents." There, out loud, recorded. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "The truth," I said, "before he does this to someone else." Danielle shook, then nodded once. "Okay." As she stood to leave, Detective Moore rose and intercepted her gently, speaking low. Danielle glanced back at me, and behind the fear, I saw regret. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Darius. "Where are you?" 3 words. No honey, no baby, no warmth, just control checking its leash. I typed back, "With Renee, resting." Then I added the lure. "I'm ready to handle the lake house paperwork. Let's talk tonight." His reply came back fast. "Good. Tonight. Just you and me. Just you and me." He was still trying to isolate me, but now I had a will, an executor, and words on tape. I slipped the recorder deeper into my purse and walked out of the diner like a woman going to meet her husband for a conversation, when really, I was going to meet him for an ending. That evening, the sky sat low and heavy, the kind of winter dusk that makes everything look like a faded photograph. Renee drove me home, but didn't pull into the driveway. She stopped a block away, lights off, engine idling. "You sure?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I'm ready." Attorney Yolanda and Detective Moore had already set the last piece in place. The will was filed, copies were locked. Danielle's statement was recorded. The county had been alerted to suspicious dock conditions, and a plainclothes unit sat 2 streets over, waiting for a signal. All that was left was Darius, the man who had held an umbrella over me at my mother's grave, the man who had whispered, "You scared me to death," while his hands still smelled like lake water. I walked up to my own front door like it belonged to someone else. The porch boards creaked under my boots, the same old sound I'd known since childhood. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and something sharper underneath. Aftershave, maybe, or intent. Darius opened the door before I could knock, like he'd been watching through the window. "There you are," he said, voice soft, smile ready. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I lied. He stepped aside and let me in, then locked the door behind me with a click that sounded too final. In the living room, he'd set the scene. Low lights, a fire going, 2 glasses on the coffee table, and a bottle of red wine already open. He wanted this to feel intimate, safe, normal. He wanted me to forget the dock had no ladder. He took my coat and hung it neatly, like he was still the man who believed in manners. "I thought we could talk," he said, guiding me toward the sofa. "About the lake house, about the paperwork." I sat, keeping my purse on my lap. Inside it, my phone recorder was already running. Darius poured wine. He handed me a glass and watched my hands. "Drink," he said lightly. "It'll help you relax." I lifted the glass, held it near my lips, then set it down untouched. Not tonight. A flicker, annoyance, quickly swallowed. He sat across from me, leaned forward, elbows on knees like a counselor. Nikki, he began, you've been distant. I almost drowned, I said. His eyes widened in practiced pain. Because you slipped. I stared at him until his smile started to strain. Then I said it, quiet as a knife sliding from a sheath. I know you cheated. The fire popped, a sharp little sound. Darius blinked once, then he laughed, gentle, disbelieving. What? I know about the affair, I repeated. I know about D. His throat moved. There is no D. Danielle, I said. Your realtor. For the first time in 8 years, his face went still. Not angry yet, not scared, just blank, like the mask had dropped, and he hadn't decided which one to put on next. Then he found the smile again. Nikki, grief is... What do you eat? Don't, I interrupted. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Don't put my mother's death on my shoulders like a blanket to smother me. Darius leaned back slowly. His eyes weren't warm anymore. They were measuring. You went through my phone, he said. I went through your lies, I replied. He exhaled through his nose, almost amused. Even if I did, talk to Danielle, so what? It doesn't change anything. It changes everything, I said. Because it wasn't just cheating, it was planning. His jaw tightened. You're accusing me of what exactly? I let a beat pass, long enough to make the air feel thin. Removing the ladder, I said. Oil on the boards. The black ice story. Darius's fingers curled around his wine glass. You're spiraling. I heard you, I whispered. At the dock, on the phone. His eyes narrowed. You were unconscious. I was surviving, I corrected. The room went quiet except for the fire and the faint hum of the refrigerator, that ordinary sound that suddenly felt obscene, like life insisting on routine while my marriage turned into a crime scene. Darius leaned forward again, voice lower now. You don't know what you think you know. I nodded slowly. You're right. I know more. He stiffened. I know you weren't trying to save me, I continued. I know you were trying to finish the story, the tragedy, the widow's inheritance, the insurance money. There it was. His eyes flinched at the word insurance, like a reflex. That's ridiculous, he snapped. Is it? I asked. Because you said it. You said it would look like an accident. You said she wanted half, but half wasn't enough. You said... I tilted my head, letting my voice go softer, colder. You said I was inconvenient. His face darkened. Watch your mouth. I smiled then, small and empty. Or what? He stood abruptly, pacing once, then turning back like a man searching for the right tool. You have no proof, he said. Text messages can be faked. People can be paid to lie. And you... He gestured at me, disgust flickering. You hit your head, Nikki. You went into cold water. You're not reliable. He was right about one thing. Words alone don't convict. That's why I didn't bring only words. I slid my phone onto the coffee table, screen facing up. I'm recording, I said. Darius froze. Say it again, I whispered. Tell me I'm not reliable. He stared at the phone like it was a snake. Then his mouth curved in something ugly. You think that scares me? It should, I said. Because in the diner, Danielle had already said it out loud. Oil film. No ladder. Nobody questions winter accidents, and Detective Moore had heard it too. Darius's voice dropped. What do you want? There it was. Not an apology, not remorse, negotiation. I want you out, I said. I want a divorce. Clean. You leave with what you brought. And if I don't? He asked. I leaned forward, letting the firelight catch my eyes. Then I tell the truth, and you won't be negotiating with me, you'll be negotiating with a prosecutor. His gaze sharpened. You wouldn't. I would have died on that dock if I hadn't played dead, I said. So yes, Darius, I would. He stepped closer, looming, and for a second I felt the old reflex: shrink, soften, make peace. I didn't move. Outside, a car door closed softly down the street, a small sound, but I knew what it meant. The unit was nearby. Darius stared at me a long time, then let out a breath that sounded like surrender. Fine, he said. Divorce. The word wasn't defeat. It was calculation. He still thought he could pivot, slip away, try again later with someone else. He reached for his coat. Where's your proof? He asked as he moved toward the door. Where's your precious evidence? I watched him, calm as ice. Safe, I said, and not where you can reach. He opened the door, and Detective Moore stepped onto my porch like a shadow with a badge. Darius Harris? Moore said. Darius's face drained. Behind Moore, another officer appeared, and another. The porch filled with the quiet weight of consequences. You're under arrest, Moore said, for attempted murder and insurance fraud. Darius's mouth opened, closed. He looked at me, eyes wide with something that might have been hate, might have been disbelief. You set me up, he hissed. I held his gaze and felt nothing but cold clarity. No, I said softly. You set me up. I just refused to die quietly. They cuffed him on my porch, the metal clicking like punctuation. As they led him away, he twisted back once, trying to throw one last hook. Nikki! He called, voice suddenly pleading. I loved you! I stepped into the doorway and let the warm light from my house spill onto the winter dark. No, I said. You loved what you thought I'd inherit. The patrol car door shut. The street went still again. Renee came up behind me and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I realized my hands were trembling, my body finally catching up to what my mind had been holding back. You did good, she murmured. I watched the taillights disappear, and in the silence, I felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not joy, not triumph. Peace, the kind my mother always meant when she said freedom is quiet. If you're still here with me, let me ask you something. What would you have done the moment you realized your husband cheated? And it wasn't just an affair, it was a plan? If this story held you to the end, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Like the video if you can, it helps more than you think. And leave a comment with where you're watching from, because I read them. Every one. Then click a video on the end screen. I'll be right there with you.